Hey there everybody, welcome to Technique Tuesday. My name is Ali Board and Technique Tuesday is the broadcast that I bring you on the first Tuesday of every month where I share a project in line with my theme of the month. We chat about materials and I take you through a project from start till almost finished. Now this Technique Tuesday is one with a difference. I try to bring it to you on the first of every month, but as you're watching this, I'm actually on holiday. If you're watching live, that is. I've set it as a premiere on YouTube because I didn't want you to miss out. Now, if you're watching it on catch up, it won't make any difference to you at all. You might also be watching it on my website, www.learningtopaint.co.uk. And because I'm recording this ahead of time, I can't actually show you where you need to find all the resources for today, but believe me, they are all there. If you go over to my website and in the menu, you click on the blog, Technique Tuesday will be there for you, or you can just search for it. There's a search bar at the top where you can put in whatever it is that you're looking for, and who knows, you might find some other delights in there too. Now, don't forget as well that you can also follow me on social media by using the key Ali Board Artist. I'm there on Facebook and I'm there on Instagram as well. I pop up on other places using that same name, and do tag me in your work even if it's not remotely related to what I do. I'd love to see what you are up to. Now, the theme of the month this month is on the farm. I'm very lucky where I live. I live right in the heart of the beautiful county of Dorset. This is my home county. It was where I was born. It's where I've grown up, and I'm so lucky to live in and surrounded by all of the things that I find terribly inspirational. And this month we've got lots of things going on where we're looking at animals that you might find on the farm, or particular aspects of it, or even things like a rusty old tractor. But I thought for Technique Tuesday, what I would do is bring you something a little bit different. So we're actually going to look at one of the crops that we have here on the farm, which is wheat. Now, it's taken me a long time, even though I was born and brought up in this county, to understand the difference between wheat and barley and rye, but I think I've got my head around it now, and I've definitely got an image for you that is wheat, and I'm going to be using a mixed media process because that's me all over, but I'm going to be using Caran d'Ache Neocolour II crayons, water-soluble crayons, because I thought you might like to see how they work. So shall we go to that overhead camera and we'll start as we mean to go on. So here we have the photograph that I am going to be using, and let's take you through a few bits and pieces of equipment. I'm going to try to film this as honestly as I can. In other words, I'm not going to edit it, or I'm going to try not to edit it unless dogs bark and birds cluck and all of those kind of things. So you should see it in absolute real time. And that means there might be a few little things around the edges that aren't as slick as they would ordinarily be. I'm trying to treat this like live. So here's my paper that I've chosen for today. This is Hahnemüller's Andalusia paper. I love all sorts of Hahnemuller papers. Paper is one of the things that is a huge variable in my work. I love using Saunders Waterford, Fabriano, Milford. Obviously, I like using black watercolour paper as well. And some of the Hahnemuller papers are really interesting in their range. And you can see here that this is a real heavy one. And this is interesting because it has two different surfaces. On the front, it is rough, and on the reverse, it is cold pressed. So it's not got quite that bobble to it, but it is a block. So it's glued all the way around, and then can you see, you can see that this is a well-loved block because it's a little bit dog-eared at the corner. I can just remove that sheet from the rest of it. I have my black and white copy of this right here, and you'll be able to download it from the blog. You'll be able to go and use it, download it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick transfer just to kind of give me an idea of where I want things. The reason that I loved this photograph so much was because of the movement in it. I didn't want them to be too static. I love that they kind of got a curve with them. There's obviously some other things going on in the background, so that's what attracted me to this photograph. So first things first, let's hinge it down. Hanamola paper doesn't like masking tape an awful lot, so you always have to be a little bit careful with it. But we'll see how we get on, shall we? Let's slide that trace down underneath, not forgetting dark side down. And we'll use a coloured biro to get our wheat stems in. Now, one of the things that makes wheat look like wheat is this very recognisable pattern. So we need to make sure that we get that in. And I am a big lover of a pattern in a subject because it kind of tells a story. It gives me something to focus on as I'm painting it. And it allows for some creative mark making, all of that kind of stuff. Let's see if it's coming through. It is coming through really beautifully. Now, some of these, I'm going to struggle to know what they're called. Hairs? Really not. I am going to put in a little more freehand later, but we must remember that when you see wheat, it's like a box. So it does have 4 sides to it, 2 of which you can see here. So I'm going to make sure that I've got that pattern in as well. Let's have a look and just see if I need anything else. I'm not so sure that I do. Let's get a few shapes going on in there. Other things I will add later. Maybe want to just sort out that pattern. Let's have a look. Yeah, that will be okay. I also love the composition of this photograph. Really clever how it's been kind of cropped and put over to the right. I'm not going to include this one despite my love of an odd number. I am actually going to go for 2. But that comes down to the fact that I'm trying to push myself an awful lot this year to break all my own rules, to all those things that I go, oh, I can't deal with even numbers, they make my head hurt. Well, because I'm an educator, then I should put myself in the position of challenging myself, shouldn't I? I challenge all my students often enough. So it would be hypocritical of me to do things in the same way all the time. And then I can truly decide whether I like them, whether the reasons that I go for them are sound. But it's testing those principles all the time. Let's have a look, see if I've got that in. Yes, that's come through really well. And then the stalk needs to come down to this side. And we'll put some of those beautiful kind of hairs, they're not called hairs, in when we take it away. Make sure that you've got everything transferred before you remove that black and white copy. And then, because Hanamola paper doesn't like masking tape, peel it away nice and carefully. I don't think I've done any damage at all. Fold those tabs over, keep that for another day. Let's put this away somewhere safe because it really doesn't like the water. And then we'll grab a pencil and a putty eraser. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly drag my putty eraser back over my surface so that I don't feel too beholden to sticking to those shapes. We want some, but we don't want too many. So let's go back in and let's see if we can develop an interesting mark that kind of screams wheat at us. Actually, what I'm going to do is get the black and white version in. Let's pop it to the side so that I can get to see it at the same time. Let's go in doing that. So we've got that kind of nice backwards and forwards. Lots of darks going in here. And I'm going to scribble those in right away. Why am I doing that? Because I feel like it. And I think it's going to set the tone for where my crayons can help me out. Okay, that's not looking too bad. Let's work our way down this kind of the back edge of our wheat. We've got a nice shape. So we're looking at that kind of pear shape, teardrop shape, however you like to describe it. We don't want to, I want this to be quite impressionistic, in line with my normal style of painting. And I've just had a thought about those kind of extended parts of the crop. I was about to put them in like this, but I think I might do them in another way. This is another thing that I like to do with Technique Tuesday, is I like to give you the kind of thought process, where I am in my head and what it is that I'm thinking about, so that you understand that my paintings tend to come together organically. I'm going to leave that just for the time being, and I'm going to make my way over to this one to do something similar. Now, what we got more defined on this one, I can see it more clearly. I have a feeling the thing that is going to say wheat is not necessarily going to be that very kind of close cropped shape. It's going to be those fibres that are coming off. But if I want it to read as wheat, then I've got to be quite careful with them, because wheat is a kind of boxy shape with these elongated fibres, but barley looks very similar. And I'm sure there'll be people screaming at the video saying, oh, but it's so easy to tell the difference, Ali. It may very well be, but I struggle to tell the difference. And the fibres, as I see it from a sort of artistic point of view, as opposed to a farming point of view, is that they are much, much longer. So we'll get those in. After all, I paint impressionistically. I know I said I was pushing myself, but I'm not pushing myself to suddenly start to paint and draw botanically. Now, where are these going? They're very similar in their approach. These stems, they kind of run in parallel, which is a bit of a compositional red flag for me. So let's change how they come together. Let's drop this one down. I can always rub this out if I don't like it. So can you see I've just ever so slightly altered them? You can see in the photograph they run parallel, and for me that does scream of being over organised, if I'm honest. So we'll do that, and then to get these fibres in, I'm going to turn my paper upside down. Let's turn my black and white copy upside down as well, so that I can clearly see where these fibres are running. That's better. Looking at it now more as a shape and less as an ear of wheat. So we've got those fibres. They've got to come from somewhere, a bit like whiskers do. If you ever draw or paint an animal that's got whiskers on it, and then they kind of fan out and get shorter as they go to the bottom. That's quite interesting. Then let's do some, these are going to be quite free form, I think, by the time I've finished. They're very close cropped on this side. And then they start to, these ones kind of come up, and then these ones start to cross over a bit more. We'll turn it the right way round in a minute, and we'll see if we've kind of got the sense of it. Yes, I like that. Really kind of nice and organic, coming together really well. I'm liking that. Okay then, let's have a think now about our colour palette, about what colours we need to put together. And before I start using the Neocolours, I'm going to give it just a watercolour background, something nice and fuzzy, so that I don't overthink it, so that I don't poke it around, all of that kind of stuff. And I was thinking about this, do I go like the photograph, all those delicious kind of golden colours? And I do want to have some in there, so I'm going to be using my own brand of watercolour. That's the Bees Gold. But I want something to contrast, and I definitely, for these wheat ears to look golden and glowing and kind of warm and really kind of give a hint of summer, I need something to counteract that. So I'm going to look to my colour theory for that, and I'm going to go for what would be complementary pairs. So on your colour wheel, you would have what is opposite that kind of very golden yellow, and I'm going to go for violet. No surprise that it's, if you know my work well, then you'll know it's one of my favourite colours. But I'm going to go for ultramarine violet, and then hopefully that will give a nice counterbalance to it. I'm going to use a nice big sloshy brush for this, and a spray bottle. So the first thing I'm going to do is just spritz these colours so they're ready to go. This is tubed colour that is squeezed out into a pan, so that it's the consistency that I like. I find tube paint too sticky. I find pans too hard. So this is what we call the Goldilocks. And I've got just an old rag here just to do any mopping. So let's give my background a bit of a spritz. And you might be able to see, which is always a bit of a shock and a surprise, a few bits of colour have started to emerge on my piece of paper, which tells me that the last time I used this pad, I was clearly using some Brusho powders. Oh, we won't worry about them, they're fine. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ultramarine violet, going to roll my brush into it, and I want some sort of nice swirling colour. I want it to kind of emulate the shape that the crop is making in there. That's rather delicious. And going on in here too, we might allow it to just drip and sort of flick backwards and forwards a little bit as well. I'm very messy with my application of watercolour, but I like it because then what happens is you get these nice organic style of marks. Definitely need to pick this up in a minute. In fact, we'll do that now. Let's pick it up. Let's give it a really good shake. You can see that the water, you can bang it as well. I've just been experimenting recently with shaking it as opposed to banging it and disturbing all my cameras. So lovely marks occurring there now. I think the other thing that I could do with is maybe some of the same thing, but coming from the top. So I'm starting to push my luck in terms of how wet this is. So I've got to be quite careful, but maybe we can add some stronger versions. Hahnemuhle paper is very good at standing up to you being quite mean to it. One of the many, many reasons that I like it. So we've got some of that colour on. Let's give it a shake this way and see if we can get some interesting marks. Quite a physical thing that I'm doing today. But yeah, look at that. We've got some interesting stuff happening. And then whilst we're there, let's give it a good old spatter too. Again, if you know my work well, you'll know that I do love this technique to give it that sort of sense of movement and immediacy. Now, while that's still damp, and I really am pushing my luck with this because it's going to get past the point of no return if I'm not careful in terms of creating backgrounds or cauliflowers or those kind of things. But we don't worry about stuff like that, do we? What we're going to do is we're going to get some of this I never thought I'd be a fan of yellow until I found this Bees Gold colour, because it's just delightful. It's a yellow with a difference because it's rich. And if you haven't got Bees Gold, you can always go for quinacridone gold or something similar. You want something that really packs a punch. And then let's go in with some of our yellow too for our spatter. And then hopefully we've got some interesting marks. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that that's the end of that background. Look at that granulation. Isn't that lovely? Let's mop up just some of the very wet puddles. And then I'm going to give it a really good dry. So bear with me while I do that. Drying really nicely. So let's put it on a slightly lower heat so that I can talk to you at the same time. One of the things to point out when you're drying a vignette style of painting in this way is don't just aim your heat at the colour. don't forget that we spritz this all the way around, so all of this bit of the paper is wet too. And so sometimes you can make your paper buckle by not literally drying all of it all the way over. Now, if you are working on a free piece of paper, and by that I mean that isn't in a block, then you'll be able to speed up your drying process because you will be able to dry it from the back as well. It's got a few last bits, so we'll turn up the heat and we'll just get it to a conclusion. There you go. And I like the sort of the marks and the shapes that my background is making. I have a feeling if I leave it like it is, I'm going to have problems with my tonal values in that the colour of the wheat isn't going to show up enough. So I'm going to do another layer in the background, which I tend to only do if I'm doing a sky or something similar. But let's see how far we can push it with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work back negatively. I'm not going to worry about these fibres so much because I can always go back in with something else if they're not showing up. And for this, I'm going to do a double loading process. So I'm going to put two colours on my brush at the same time. And then when I work back in, I'm hopeful, let's pick up a bit more of that violet. We're getting this really delicious kind of browny grey out of it that I'm loving. If I work back in and kind of amongst it, I want to be able to make some bigger marks with it too, and I still want to keep them nice and loose. But I'm hoping that if I pop them in like that, I'll have a better variation in my tone. Let's lose some of them as well, so let's fuzz out some of those edges. We don't necessarily want them all looking like that. Those are very blocky. I'm not wild about those, so we can blend those out. And can you see how very quickly that ear of wheat is coming forwards? I've got much lighter tones, so that hopefully I've only really got to work on the shadows. Now this side, because I'm right-handed, is going to be a challenge, particularly as I like to paint upright. If I start twisting it and moving it around, it makes it difficult to see. But what I can do is turn it 180 degrees and repeat that process. So if you're right-handed, you will find that the right-hand side of things is easy to paint. And if you're left-handed, then you'll find the left-hand side of things is easy to paint. So there's no reason at all why you can't turn it 180 degrees and then you have the best of both worlds, don't you? So repeating that process, using that dark to kind of stroke into those shapes, to work on them a bit negatively. Let's pull some of this colour. That's such a lovely colour, isn't it? Using that complementary pairing of the yellow and the violet. It's not brown, it's not violet, it's not yellow, it's not grey. It's just a delicious combination of the two. And then if I take my brush and we do a blending out style process, I can take some water, maybe not that much, up to that edge, soften some of it so that it disappears into the background, and then using the tip of my brush to soften some of those edges too. Let's pull it round the right way. Yes. Look at that. And we haven't lost any of that dynamic quality in the background. In fact, we have kind of built on it. Now going into this, this is quite wet in here. So going into that, I'm going to exploit part of that kind of nice damp surface that I've got and do a little bit of wet into wet work in terms of those kind of fibres, just to suggest them. Not wild that they all stop in the same place. Let's run some of those off and into another area. Can always soften that. There we go, that's better. And let's come down to this one. This one's going to be a bit trickier because we've got one side deeper than the other, but that's okay. It's a good opportunity to lose some of our edges. So going back into here, what have we got going on? Can you see as well that I do like a little rehearsal with my brush? Before it goes onto the paper, I go, oh, it's going in there and it's going to do this. Just so that I'm thinking about the mark that I'm making before I make it. So let's get more of that violet involved down here. So we've got a lovely sludgy kind of colour going on. And extend that. It'll hit what's going on the right hand side and hopefully do some nice wet into wet things. I'm reluctant to lose some of that white or paler area that I've got in there. So let's not. Let's just soften and see what we get. I'm looking very hard at how wet my brush is as well. So I'm trying to match how wet this is with how wet my paper is so that I don't get any back runs, cauliflowers or the same. And then coming down on this side, just got a little shape there that I want to soften. Let's do the same, but let's not have so much of the bee's gold. Let's go for more of the violet because it's very violet on this side. And then have a quick look at the photo, going into there, creating that lovely mark, going in between those ears, down into the bottom. Haven't really concluded what's going on down there. And then let's make, still quite yellow, isn't it? I think my yellow is slightly stickier than my violet. I think I need to top up this pan. Yes, that's better. That's what I was after. And then let's bring some of these across. They're going to need softening. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And then we'll turn it round the right way. Yeah, look at that. Sort of looks like flames, which I'm not sad about at all. I think that's quite an interesting mark, but I do need to soften some of these. Some of these are too hard. Why am I softening them? I'm softening them because I don't want them to look like they're outlined. I don't want to sort of fall into that mark making trap of making the same mark over and over again. It is severely lacking. I am going to have to put it on its side because it is severely lacking some extension of colour down in here, which we need to get in before I get myself in trouble and sort of slightly miss the boat in being able to apply it. Let's add some water so that it runs off, and let's soften some of these marks that I've made so that they don't look too obvious. Not wild about that, so let's put a bit of toweling into there. That's better. Actually, let's just see what happens when the toweling gets involved with some of these colours. Okay, yeah, I'm pleased with that. Do I want to do any more to any of that? I don't think I do for the time being. I don't want to overcomplicate things at this stage. I'm very good at overcomplicating it in the later parts of the process. So once again, let's give this another dry, shall we? So it is getting there. If I wasn't under the pressure of a demonstration, then I would probably allow this to dry overnight, maybe. Who knows? I am an impatient painter. I never apologise for being an impatient painter. One of the reasons that I'm able to paint impressionistically is because I'm impatient, or because I set myself time limits on how I do it. This is still quite damp at the bottom. Okay, it's not quite as dry as it could be, but it's dry enough for the time being. And this gives me the opportunity to talk to you about a big event that I've got coming up. Now, if you are watching this live, or you are watching it at the beginning of May 2024, then you may or may not be aware of an event that I get involved with every other year, because it's biannual, called Dorset Art Weeks. And Dorset Art Weeks is when we get to throw open the doors of our studios. Mine needs a lot of tidying before I can do that. And we share our work, we share our practices, we share the space that we are creative in, and you're very welcome to come along. So let me just share with you that information just in case you fancy a visit. If you can't get here, don't worry. I'm going to tell you all about how you can get involved with my Dorset Art Weeks exhibition. So here is the advert as you might see it online or in the brochure. 235 is my venue number, and so as you can see, there's a lot of things to see in the county of Dorset. But let's just draw your attention to some of the things that are going to be important to you if you do think of visiting. There's my address down in Farm Studio, my mobile number, and a couple of ways that you can get in touch with me. Further down that advert, you'll see directions to my studio. That little funny selection of words there with the 3 forward slashes, that is if you use the What 3 Words app. What 3 Words is an incredibly clever app where it divides the surface of the planet up into metre square sections, and it gives each one a series of 3 words, which makes every single one unique. So all you have to actually do in the What 3 Words app is put Eternally Shine Spike in, and that will literally bring you to my front door. I am open every single day of the event, so that is the 25th of May, Saturday the 25th of May to Sunday the 9th of June. I'm open 10:30 till 5:30. And just in case you're concerned about how you can get to me, I have really good access if you find yourself with mobility issues, excellent parking, and of course, I welcome any pets. You're very welcome to stop and chat a while. Now, one of the things to say about the Dorset Art Weeks event is there's absolutely no obligation. Now, I've got a big exhibition going on. It's part of my 50 at 50 project. So that's 50 paintings for my 50th year around the sun, and 50% of the profit is going to the Dorset Wildlife Trust. So it's all kind of coming together for me, really. We're so close to the 50 now, and that runs as an auction. So if you're not able to get here, then go to the website and look at the 50 at 50 part of it, or keep an eye on my socials, and I'll be sharing lots of information with you so that you can still purchase one of my pieces of artwork that you might get for an absolute bobby bargain, because each one of them starts at £50. And those are mounted. I can post them to you for an extra fee. Lots of information on the website for you to enjoy. If you are in the area or you fancy coming to see me, like I said, there's no obligation whatsoever. Don't think because that you are walking through the door that you have to purchase anything. That is not the case at all. I would love to see you. I'd love to catch up with you over a cup of coffee. Come talk to the chickens. The dogs will probably be shut away, it has to be said, but we can chat about all things art. So should we get on with this demonstration? It's looking a bit dry. It's still a bit damp around the edges, but we won't worry about that for the time being. Now I'm going to put it to one side because I want to talk to you about Caran d'Ache Neocolour. Now here is my tin of Neocolour crayons. You can buy these individually. You can buy these as sets of 10 and 20 and 40, I think it is. This is a full set. I have had Neocolours for a long time, but my old set got a bit abandoned. I'd sort of worn out a few colours, and then my various great nieces, nephews and the children in my life had got hold of them. So last year I treated myself to a brand spanking new set, but you don't have to have this many colours at all. But if you do like a tin, what's not to like about this? So here are your crayons. Now they're very unusual Neocolours because they're water soluble. So I will be able to work with them. I'll be able to colour with them, shade with them, mark make with them, do all sorts of things with them. And then when I take a damp brush, which you'll see me do in a second, I'll be able to smudge them, move them around my piece of paper. But they do have a waxy consistency to them. They're really odd. But as you can see, one of the things Caran d'Ache do brilliantly is that they do think their colours through. They don't just sort of do that kind of what I call a spectrum selection. They don't go, oh, there's a couple of reds, a couple of yellows. Look at all the greys. If you think of all the subjects that I like to paint in terms of animals, in terms of landscapes, buildings, look at that selection. Isn't it fabulous? So less of the very bright colours, although there are some completely delicious ones, and more of the natural colours. And that's where we're going to start today. So I'm going to go for, what do I want to go for? You see, this is me thinking out loud. I think I'm going to go for a sort of olivey brown for my naturalistic colour. And then I am going to go for one of the punchy ones, just to kind of get, honestly, you'd think with all these colours I'd have every colour I could ever possibly want. And yet still I'm looking at going, oh, I'm not sure that I have the right one. What else do we want? Let's have a look at that photograph. I'm drawn to this kind of apricot colour. I think that might be quite interesting. I'm also going to need a violet, aren't I? Because I've got violet in the background. And the ultramarine violet is a very bluey violet. So I don't want to deviate far from that. But maybe I'll go for something really quite dark. Let's try that. They look rather lovely together, don't they? Look at that. Liking that combination. Am I going to need anything else? I'm probably going to need a white, although I might use white gouache towards the end. And then I still think I'm going to need something really kind of pizzazzy and punchy. So maybe, what should we go for? Is that pizzazzy and punchy enough? Do you know what? I think it might be. We'll start with those anyway. It's not like I don't have other colours to choose from. What I am going to have to do is put the lid on. Otherwise, there is a grave danger that I'm going to knock them everywhere. And if you're a regular viewer to Technique Tuesday, you will know that surrounding me is a whole floor of detritus, because I'm very good at just shoving things behind me. So actually, now looking at this, now this would have been sensible, wouldn't it? Rather than comparing it to the photograph, why didn't I pick up my painting? But actually, I've carried those colours through in my head. Not too bad. Maybe I should have gone for something more yellow, but then you could argue, couldn't you, that actually the Bees Gold is doing a pretty good job of the yellow. Why do I need to do anything else to it? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch and draw with these on dry, and then I'm going to wet it with a brush afterwards. So let's start as we mean to go on, and let's get some highlights in. Now, you will see that I shifted my hand very quickly to over the top of my crayon. I tend to find if I use a crayon like this, holding it as you would do to do some handwriting, I make marks that are too careful and ordered. So what I'm actually going to do is hold the crayon over the top, and then hopefully I'll get some interesting marks. And look how they cover as well. Very good at kind of making extra lights. While we're on it, let's get the white involved and see if we can get some really interesting highlights going. Yeah, look at that. Working very well. And a thing that I love, if you own some Neocolour, you will know exactly what I mean. They're very smooth on the paper. They kind of glide across the paper. And that was another reason for me choosing Hahnemuller today, because Hahnemuller and Neocolour, for me, go together really quite well. They kind of glide, is the only way to describe it, across the surface. But you'll, just do an experiment. See what papers you like to use them with. Now, what haven't I done? I haven't used this kind of golden... Ooh, that's nice. Kind of counteracting what's going on. And then I mustn't forget some of these extra marks in the background. So I'm going to make my marks quite loose to start with. I'm going to maybe not go for the darks quite yet, because I'm hoping the darks are going to be the thing that define the shape. Oh, I mustn't neglect my stems. Let's get some of those in. That kind of, what was this called? So this is called Desert Rose. Over the top of the violet is working quite nicely. Do I want to do any more to that? No, I don't. And I'm going to switch to a brush now that I've got a bit more control over. So I'm going for my imitation sable brush. I did leave it in the water, and so the varnish is coming off the handle, but luckily they're such good quality brushes that nothing has happened to the actual bristle on them. And what I'm doing is I'm just making my brush damp, not wet. In fact, one of my preferred methods is to actually take the water off on my hand so that I can actually feel how much colour, how much water I should say, I've got on that brush. So a bit of smoothing, bit of blending on there. I'm not trying to paint this in, as daft as that sounds. I'm trying to think about the marks and the shapes and smooth the colour over. I'm not trying to paint each one. I'm trying very, very hard to make it a bit more impressionistic than that. Now, something weird has happened at the top of this one. It's very flat. It does look quite flat in the photograph. Perhaps I was about to extend it, but I'm just wondering if I can do that with those extra fibres. Do you know what, Ali? Leave well alone. So the thing I'm going to do now is give it another blast of heat. Now, this is always the point of the painting that people struggle with in a big way, because you sort of come so far with it, haven't you? But maybe can't necessarily see what direction it's going in, or it's all very even tone. But this is one of my favourite parts of painting, because this is where you get to put the darks in. And if you want your lights to look light, then you need your darks to look dark. What you have to be brave with them. You have to counterbalance one with the other. So I'm going to start with this aubergine kind of colour, and I'm going to work on the kind of bits in between, the little nooks and crannies. Let's have a good look at the shape that is going on here. It needs to kind of go up and around, doesn't it, into those nooks and crannies. Now you can sharpen your Neocolour as well if you want to get it to a finer point. You'll see me kind of twizzle it around until it's on a sharp aspect. But let's get, already that's looking better, isn't it? Because this dark is sort of matching the surroundings. But let's not get regular about it. Let's miss a few. Otherwise it might look like a zipper, mightn't it? Let's get a few in down here. What's happening at the base of these? I think that's a job for this crayon actually. And then let's go over to this side. So we've got, no, that's a job for this crayon. Have a word with yourself, Ali. So we need to get those lovely, delicious, curved shapes so that we see the individual parts of each ear. That's looking better, kind of coming forward a bit now. It's going to need some other things, and you know, the Neocolour is not going to be every part of it. I have done a couple of paintings that are just Neocolour on their own, but I do think they are more of an addition to a mixed media kind of creative palette than being used on their own. My personal preference is to do them exactly like this, to use them for their very particular mark making properties rather than relying on them for everything. Oh, this is a good colour. What was this one called? Olive brown. Look how it matches. I mean, I'd love to be able to tell you that I did that on purpose, but I really didn't. Just picked it out. Now we need to put some shading in to the right of this, don't we? And what we can do, which I'm thrilled about, is we can extend this background into each kind of individual ear so that it looks like that background is extending. Oh, I'm loving that. We can get a nice shadow in on there too. And one of the things I think I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use it to start the conversation about those kind of fibrous elements so that they're not all pale, so that some of them are dark too. And I'm probably not going to wet those. We'll see what happens. But I think they're making an interesting mark all on their own. I am starting to lose the point on this a little bit. Let's have a quick look at my photograph and stop making it up, Ali, and get back to paying attention. That's lovely. And you might not be able to see it on the camera, but this sort of waxy quality does kind of give it a different look, a different feature to it, a different kind of texture on the surface. So let's actually we'll use the other end to get some finer lines going in. We definitely need some extreme highlights, and I think I know how I'm going to do that, but for the time being, quite happy with that secretly. Let's wet these, shall we? So we've got that, whatever it was called, olive brown going in, but I want to pick up some of that aubergine with my brush as well, so that it's more like a shadow, less like a line. That's better. Also, you get you can, if you are one of life's faffers, and I am one, as much as I say all the time, don't faff, don't poke it around. This is a faffer's delight. This is. I'm not wild about the length of some of those marks, but I can go back in. I'm pretty sure I know how I'm going to complete this and finish it off. I think gouache is going to be deliciously involved somewhere, because I need to pull some of those highlights back again. But that's okay. You could, of course, I always like to think about other ways that you could paint something. You could, of course, have masked out these wheat ears if you had chosen to. If you like something a bit crisper, or you don't like putting your whites in after, and there's no shame in putting your whites in after, just before anybody says. But if you like to have all your brights and your lights done right at the start, then you could have masked this out, couldn't you? That would have been quite interesting, I think. Liking this one. This one's gone a bit astray, but this one seems to be working well. I think I did a better job of the in-between marks on this one, but that's all right. This is impressionistic ear of wheat. It isn't botanical ear of wheat by any means. Now, I don't like the texture in that, so let's soften that a little bit. That's better. And have a good look at it. Let's have a really good look at it. I am almost certain that I know what it is that I need to do to finish this, but of course, I need to dry it. How's that looking? Not too bad. Let's reach for our safety net. Good old gouache. So just in case you've not come across gouache before, I tend to call this posh poster paint, but that's doing it a massive disservice. This is a much more opaque consideration than watercolour, a much more creamy consistency than watercolour is. And I have got permanent white here. There's a couple of whites that you can use. This is permanent white. It's hopefully, if I get it to this nice kind of yogurt kind of consistency, somewhere between kind of cream and yogurt really, then it should cover really well. And I use a tinting saucer, a stacking saucer. You could use a plate as well, just because I find it much easier to get the consistency that I want on something ceramic as opposed to something plastic. Now, let's not spoil this. So I'm going to look back in and I'm going to look for the highlights on these shapes. Not only looking at the photograph and looking at the kind of shapes that this wheat should be, but also responding to my painting. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love about gouache, and no one is ever going to convince me any different, is the fact that it is permanently blendable. What do I mean by that? I mean that I could let that dry, I could go away on holiday, come back again, and I'd still be able to smudge this with a slightly damp brush. And that's what makes it different from acrylic, and that is why I prefer it to acrylic. That doesn't mean that you can't use acrylic. What that means is that this is the way that I like to put my highlights in. This is the way that I like to sort of differentiate between my lights and my darks. You just got to find the process and the material that works for you. See how all of a sudden, I don't think I need to overextend the highlights on the right hand side. I think this is fine, but they do need a bit of a smudge so that they don't look like they're standing out. I think when I get those fibres in, that's going to start to come together. Pleased with that. What's going on this side? Where are my lights? They're definitely in here. So we'll get a couple of them in. But again, I don't want to go down these and make everything ultimately identical, because it will just look too human made. It won't look kind of organic and like I want it to. So a bit of smudging in there to get some of those described. It's interesting, isn't it? When a couple of processes ago, I much preferred this one to this one. Now I prefer this one. Isn't that weird? It's just the way paintings come together. Fabulously frustrating. Right, I'm done with that. Now what I'm going to reach for is a rigger brush. So a rigger brush has a longer than normal bristle, originally designed for painting rigging on ships. That's where the name comes from. And you can do some brilliant line work with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load up some white. I'm fairly sure that this is going to be too bright, but I'm going to put some in and then I'm going to do something, well, I think I'm going to do something to my gouache to help me out. Now I've got to hold, if I hold my rigger down here, the mark that I put in won't have that freedom. So I'm going to hold my brush much further away, and look, you see, look, there's the rehearsal going in, and I'm going to lay my brush down, and it's too wide as well. Interesting. So I've got it loaded up with too much colour. That's okay, look, I can smudge that out and it's all fine and dandy. So it has too much colour on it. So let's not load all of the bristles, let's just load some of the bristles. And a much lighter touch. There we go. That's better. A sort of more like a kind of a flick or a dust going in. And it won't happen every time. I've got to hit that piece of paper really correctly for them to work. I could slow it down. Yeah, I think slowing down the brush mark might help. Do you know what? I'll do what I was going to do anyway, and we'll see if that makes a difference. I thought these were going to stand out and be whiter, but I'm not. I think they're probably pale enough. Let's go in. We've got just some cheeky little highlights going in. Let's have a look and see what that looks like. I'm hoping that it really sort of makes it. Yes, it does. But let's show you that little technique. Do this in a separate palette, that's the word I'm looking for. What colour shall I go for? I'm tempted to use this one. What was this one called? This was the apricot. And I'm going to take a palette knife and I'm going to shave some of my Neocolour into my gouache. Just a little bit into there. You could grate it if you wanted to. And then I'm going to mix that together with my white gouache. And yes, I know that I'm kind of tinting my white gouache, so now it's a kind of a pale apricot colour. That's all right. I don't think I've got enough, actually. I think I've been a bit mean with it. Let's shave some more off into there. That'll be fine. And then let's take the water to it. And get that's better. Now that might not be showing up in the camera. It might still look pretty white. Let's just get, so yeah, can you see there? It's got this sort of delicious apricot-y tinge to it. And then what I'm going to do is go back in with my rigger. Now we learnt, didn't we, that I don't want to load it up with too much. I just need to load up the tip of it, which is very unusual for me. Usually I load all the bristles up, but we saw, didn't we, that if I put too much on, it makes too thick a line. Oh, look at the difference that's making. Isn't that interesting? Liking that. We need some longer ones at the top. This is like whiskers. It's the best sort of bit, isn't it, of getting the thing in that really describes your subject matter. And then let's get some more over on this side. Fabulous. Let's go in. Now, on a scale of 1 to ridiculously dangerous, how tempting is it for me to put too many of these in? I would say astonishingly tempting. But what we'll do is we'll get it the right way up. Do you know what? I think I better stop somewhere near there. But, of course, it needs a spatter. Of course it needs a spatter. It's a painting of mine. Of course it needs a bit of a final flourish. Maybe my shadows could be deeper. Maybe they could. Maybe I could do more work to show some of the shape a bit more. But that's not what this painting was about. This painting was always going to be about the kind of movement, about getting the idea of the subject going on. I'm going to put a little bit more violet in as well over the top. This is an impressionistic ear of wheat that I've put together from start to finish in just about an hour. So, you know, if I had more time, if I was so inclined, I might want to put more detail in, but I don't. Technique Tuesday is always about getting things onto the paper and having fun in the application. So there you have it, my golden wheat in mixed media, but predominantly with Neocolour II crayons. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed that, and I'm hoping that that showed you another way of working. You might have Neocolours lurking in the back of your cupboard somewhere, in which case go find them, drag them out, or use an alternative. Maybe you have ink tense blocks. Maybe you've got a product that I don't know about. But if you are watching this either on YouTube or via the blog, please do leave me a comment, especially because this is being pre-recorded and I haven't had the opportunity to chat to you today. If you have been watching this live on YouTube, there will have been a chat going on. I've left that because Technique Tuesday is all about our community as well, isn't it? It's about talking to each other and swapping notes. And I promise you that when I get back from holiday, I'll be going through those comments to see what you have been chatting about and to answer any questions that you might have. But get involved with the talk. Don't worry if you've only been painting a couple of weeks. Your talk is still valid. The opinions that you have are still absolutely fine. And if you are a bit more advanced, then you'll have a wealth of knowledge to share with people. Now, hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for being patient as this is pre-recorded. I will be back in June, and we've got a very different demonstration in June because my theme of the month in June is the Impressionists, and so I'm going to be looking at Walter Sickert's Venice. So something very different from these ears of wheat. But thank you very much for joining me. Don't forget to go over to the Learning to Paint website if you need to look at any of the resources, and to follow me on social media. I hope that I get to see you during Dorset Art Weeks. And like I said, if you're not able to visit, then hopefully I will get to chat to you online as well. So no matter whether I see you online or in person, take lots and lots and lots of care of yourself, won't you? I'm going to be sunning myself in Manchester on holiday. That's not a thing, is it? But I will catch up with you very soon. Take care, lovely people. Bye.